We begin the day with the two threats to the world as we know it. That, according to the Biden administration. Today, U.S. President Biden released his national security strategy, a prediction of geopolitics for the near and long term through Washington's eyes. China stands out as the biggest challenge to the international order. The White House says that Beijing is intent on spreading its model of authoritarian rule and that it is quickly achieving the economic and military power needed to turn plans into action. But in the immediate future, the U.S. sees Russia as the biggest threat, one that needs to be contained through a unified front. That is the message delivered today in Brussels, where NATO members are meeting along with 50 other countries committed to helping Ukraine. Here is the U.S. Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin.
And in the past few days, Putin has given us all another grim preview of a future in which the appetites of aggressive autocrats outweigh the rights of peaceful states. But we're going to do everything we can, as fast as we can, to help the Ukrainian forces get the capability they need to protect the Ukrainian people. That's very, very important to us. We would all be less secure in a world where big powers can assault their peaceful neighbors and trample their borders by force.
Well, that NATO meeting taking place as Russian airstrikes in Ukraine continue. More civilian targets were destroyed today, the third consecutive day of massive aerial assaults on the country. A strike on a crowded market killed at least 7 people in the town of Avdiivka in the eastern Donetsk region. The governor there saying none of the targets had any military purpose. The Kremlin says that these latest airstrikes are retaliation for an explosion last weekend on the only bridge connecting Russia with occupied Crimea. Today, Moscow said that it has detained 8 suspects connected to what it is calling a Ukrainian-backed terrorist attack. The security service says these people include 5 Russians, 3 Ukrainian, and 3 Armenian citizens. Kyiv has not claimed responsibility for the blast and has called Moscow's investigation nonsense. Well, there are a lot of moving parts to this conflict tonight. That's why we are happy to welcome Jade McLean to the show. She is a senior researcher at the Monterey Initiative in Russian Studies. She joins me tonight from Oxford in the UK. Jade, it's good to have you on the program. The U.S. and NATO are pushing this message that Vladimir Putin is running out of options and that he's running out of time. Is he?
Thank you for having me. Is he running out of time? No, I don't think he is running out of time, and I don't think that's really something that will depend on NATO or the US. I think he is slightly, I think what's probably more to the point is that he's running out of options. And I think that's a much more difficult one because he hasn't really left himself much space to turn around or to back out, especially since he declared partial mobilization. So I think he has time, but I don't think he has options.
Yeah, and when you're talking about options, I mean, what would those options be right now?
Right now, there's the obvious option, well, not obvious, but the rather horrific option that everybody is discussing, which is the nuclear option, which I think is very, very unlikely, but of course must remain on everybody's radar for perfectly self-explanatory reasons. Mm-hmm. The other options would, of course, be that he somehow backs down or turns around or starts putting out feelers for negotiations. However, I think his break with reality is such that it's very difficult. It's very difficult for him to come up with anything that would be acceptable. And there's in no way that he's prepared the Russian people. If anything, the propaganda and the sort of loud figures in Russia are trying to whip up further war hysteria among the Russian population. So it's very difficult. I think there's a tendency sometimes in the West to think that, okay, Putin is this dictator who says, oh, this is how I want it and that's how it will be. And that's not the case at all.
Let me ask you about the situation for the Ukrainian military. Air defense systems from the U.S. and now from Germany are now in Ukraine. Last night, there was a Ukrainian lawmaker here on this program, and she told me that these deliveries are too little, too late. She still wants a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which we know that the U.S. president has said is not going to happen. Is she right, though, that the air defense weapons are not enough?
I think, sadly, Monday showed that the attacks on Kiev and on other cities, I think they showed that clearly Ukraine needs further air defense. My understanding is that there are certain technologies that could be useful. I know that people talk about the fact that Israel's Iron Dome technology wouldn't be appropriate, but I think there are other forms of air defense technology that I know Israel has that would be useful. But of course, that's really a bilateral issue rather than a sort of NATO allies and Ukraine discussion. But I know there's plenty that could still be sent, and personally I hope it is, because whilst I completely understand that a no-fly zone is, bluntly, it's not enforceable because it would involve NATO planes shooting down Russian planes, and that is just too escalatory. I do think that there are other ways that we could help Ukraine to protect its skies, and we should do everything short of something that could very reasonably spark a nuclear war.
And there is, of course, a lot of hope that this war will have an end sooner rather than later. And we just heard yesterday that Vladimir Putin may be open to a one-on-one meeting with President Biden at the G20 summit next month. Now, this news coming from the Russian foreign minister and not from the U.S. or from the West. Is this, do you think, an attempt to create that off-ramp for Vladimir Putin? And if it is, I mean, it would be coming from the Russians, wouldn't it? And instead of coming from the evil West, as they have said.
Well, we've seen some interesting sort of outreach, haven't we, really, from the Kremlin recently, including the Elon Musk tweets, which were very much commented on, and now this sort of signalling of an openness to a meeting. I would note that Biden has shot down that. Well, it was a bad choice of words, but Biden has refused that opportunity, I think, unless it were to discuss U.S. prisoners who are currently held in Russia. In terms of an off-ramp, I think clearly the war is not going well for Russia, but the sorts of things that Putin is insisting on, the recognition that these four territories plus Crimea belong to, so Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk regions, plus Crimea all belong to Russia, and that Ukraine will take on some sort of neutral status. They're really just non-starters. And I think we have to really be careful here as well as sort of Western countries to remember that Ukrainians have agency in this too, and really, Ukrainians right now are not for negotiating. I think every single poll shows that.
You mentioned the Tesla CEO Elon Musk. He is denying a report that he spoke directly with Vladimir Putin recently about the war in Ukraine and about a proposed peace plan. He's denying that because the political scientist Ian Bremmer, who has often been a guest here on this program, Ian has said that Musk told him that he had spoken recently with Putin, and this has created a Twitter storm. I want to show you this thread from Ian Bremmer earlier today from the Eurasia group. He tweeted this: Elon Musk told me that he had spoken with Putin and the Kremlin directly about Ukraine. He also told me that the Kremlin's red lines are what they are, these red lines for the Kremlin. He then tweeted again: I have been writing my weekly newsletter on geopolitics for 24 years. I write honestly without fear or favor, and this week's update was no different. Followed by, I've long admired Musk as a unique and world-changing entrepreneur, which I've said publicly he's not a geopolitics expert. And then you had Elon Musk himself weighing in, tweeting simply, nobody should trust Bremmer. Now, we brought this up because in a tweet just last week, Musk laid out a Ukraine-Russia peace plan that has the exact same terms as the one that Bremmer says Musk told him that he got from Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is the world's richest man. He admits that he has spoken with Vladimir Putin. He speaks with the U.S. President Biden. Is there a Musk factor in this conflict, and should the Ukrainians be worried about it?
I think the Ukrainians should take note of it, given the importance of Starlink, which comes from, which obviously is something that Musk controls and owns, the importance of Starlink to keeping the Ukrainian army sort of connected and networked within in their fight against Russia. So I think they do have to.
Let me just say, the Starlink is, of course, is internet access via satellites, also which Musk owns, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's been very important. Just really cannot be overstated. And interestingly, actually, just before I came on air, I noticed that Elon Musk had tweeted to say how he was very happy to provide this support. I think it was a Ukrainian. I didn't quite notice who, but I think it was a Ukrainian official was thanking Musk for the importance of Starlink to their success, and Musk said that he was very happy to sort of play his part in their success. So I don't know if this Twitter storm has chastened him. He doesn't seem like the sort of individual that's easily chastened. So, but in any case, I mean, to come back to the debate, of course, it's a little bit he says.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. But on another level, I mean, Mr. Bremer is, this isn't some sort of random Substack that he's running. He speaks to very serious people, and I do find it quite hard to imagine he would just make up a conversation.
Yeah, and we do have to, full disclosure, we asked Ian Bremer to come on the program tonight. He has agreed. He said, I can't do it tonight, but he says, I will come on the program and talk with you about this, which we believe, because, as I said, he's been on many times before. Let me ask you, before we run out of time, there was a UN General Assembly vote this evening about Russia's recent annexations of territory in eastern Ukraine, overwhelming condemnation of Russia in that vote. Is Russia going to care? Is it going to change anything on the ground?
No, I don't think it will. And I think it's another factor that points to the difficulties really that we have with the UN when you have a member of the UN Security Council like Russia sort of, committing the sort of atrocities that it is committing. It's very difficult to see the current setup of the UN as anything but highly dysfunctional.
Jade McClin from the Monterey Initiative in Russian Studies. We appreciate your time and your insights tonight. A lot of ground to cover, and we did that. Thank you.
Thank you.